So my name's Keegan Caldwell. I'm the City of Moscow's sustainability intern.
You get closer to the mic.
You don't get to move around. You gotta.
All right, I'll stay in one spot. So over the last couple months, I've been working on the update for the greenhouse gas inventory. Really what this is a collaboration of different departments across the city working on the report that it was originally set in motion in 2010. This is really an example of the city's commitment to sustainability and in our community and to our city. And so, too many. Basically, the document that you are going to receive or are receiving right now is a work in motion. It's a work in progress in many ways. It's got a few different things that still remain to be updated, but for the most part, this is a great indicator of where we're at and where we're going. And again, this is just kind of a progression towards the city's goals, which is to reduce our 2005 levels by 20% by the year 2020. So there's a few different things that are different from the old report and to the new report. 2005 report, the 2010 report was using 2005 data as a baseline. And as part of that, there were a few different things and methodologies that were kind of lost along the way that didn't allow for me to go back and redevelop those numbers in the same way that they were originally done in the report. So in part of that, we went on a kind of scavenger hunt for new programs and new software to update this report. And there was about 3 different programs that we went through. The first one was called Portfolio Manager, which was using a collaboration with Avista through Energy Star, and that was a really good look at our facilities on their usage of natural gas and electricity and water, but they didn't really touch on the different areas of what a greenhouse gas inventory really is focusing on. It spans over the entirety of the city and not just our facilities. So I went later and found at a few meetings with the leads on the similar report for the University of Idaho and the software that they were using for that. They were using a program called Clean Earth, Cool Planet. Clean Earth, Cool Planet really starts to touch on where we were going with our report and areas of emphasis. Well, when I completed Clean Air, Cool Planet, the report came back that we were at such astronomical leads on where we'd been from 2005 to where we were for 2012 that I kind of knew that something was wrong. So we found out that we needed to go back to ICLEI to at least retrieve the data that we had in 2005 to kind of evaluate that baseline. So in the process, we ended up updating the software for ICLEI, and again, it's going to be updated in January. And with that, this is kind of where the report turned out to go. So in part of the issue was that we didn't have an update of or an idea of keeping track of each sector that is contributing. So under a terminology that's frequently used in the city, or not in the city, but in other reports of the like, is the term of scopes. And scopes is basically an umbrella term that basically just takes all the different sectors that contribute greenhouse gases and moves them out into kind of 3 main categories. And so scope 1 is basically stationary combustion, which in the city of Moscow is pretty much just natural gas in our facilities, but it would be anything that is going through the reaction of combustion and producing greenhouse gases as a result, and then also our vehicle fleet. Scope 2 are emissions that come from the associated greenhouse gases that come out of electricity that's purchased from Avista. And then Scope 3 is emissions from other sources such as solid waste and employee commute. It also touches on employee flight for work-related purposes and other sectors. So going a little further into it, this is kind of a graph of the results temporarily, or the current results out of ICLEI. And there's still some information that needs to be changed, and this graph will kind of change as the software gets updated in January. But as you can see, there's a few different areas that have seen increases, but there are also different areas that have seen decreases. I'd like you to take a good look at this streetlights, because this is probably the biggest discrepancy that's up there. There's been some issues with that, and I'll go on into that in a little bit. But so as far as Scope 1 is concerned, stationary combustion is basically just the natural gas that is burned in the facilities here. Since 2005, there's been about 1,000 therms difference collectively that's been dropped since 2005 levels. As you can see, it's kind of been an up and down fashion since 2005, but a large portion of that is the pool has done good amounts of work on decreasing the natural gas that's been associated with heating, and then there's also been other areas in the city that have had facilities that also saw a decrease in their natural gas consumption.
Ian, are you willing to take a question? Looks like Tom has one.
You said, you said verbally 2005, but the slide says 2012. I'm suspecting that is meant to be 2005.
So it started in 2005. Oh, down since 2000. Yeah, sorry, that was.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, you're
okay.
correct.
I was just trying to.
And I will point out that this actually ends in 2011 because I had some issues with Avista getting the last 3 months for December, or December, November, and October for 2012. And without that information, it makes us drop about another 2,000. So to avoid that kind of skewed information, that's why 2012 is not represented in this graph. So vehicle fleet has really been probably one of the most successful areas in decline since 2005. Eco-Driver program has been really successful. As this top graph is kind of a representation of a month-to-month decline or usage of fuel by our fleet. And the bottom graph is kind of a overall total look of fuel consumption by our fleet in just the last 3 years. And as you can see, we've seen big decreases even since 2010. Really, Eco-Driver is successful because it's a program that aims to educate our employees. And because that is we're impacting the social side of these implications, you're starting to see behavior shifts and cooperations with the city and the employees, and that kind of collaboration of hard work is what really makes these large declines, which is going to be crucial for kind of the final step of this whole process. So Scope 1, vehicle fleet, when looking at this graph, you can see that there's a minor increase here. And part of that is all of it is entering errors into ICLEI. What happened was all of the rolling stock and non-rolling stock of vehicles, which in 2005 there was 208, now there's 220, so there's been an increase in our fleet since 2005. But predominantly what you're seeing here is all of them in ICLEI are broken down by department, and then the fuel usage of the entirety department, and not the fuel usage per car. And so what that happens is without the factors of fuel efficiency and how often the large rigs are driving out on the road versus how often the smaller rigs are driving out on the road, it makes it look like this data is making a much higher impact as far as CO2. After this update, though, in January, when that information gets entered on a per-car basis and not a per-department basis, those numbers are likely to drop and kind of fit this intuitive nature of dropping because of fuel usage drops. So, Scope 2, this is another really big area of concern from the 2005 to the 2012. Really big change that actually impacted our CO2 emissions quite substantially. So this map is basically taken off of a EPA collaborative that is called Egret. Egret is basically representation of the energy usage across the United States. And so these colored areas on the map are basically breakdowns of large coefficients, which is a factor that's multiplied out by your total energy usage to get your equivalent GHG emissions. So in the Northwest, our power is all hydropower. So the associated CO2 emissions and GHG emissions with hydropower are much smaller than that of coal power. In the original 2005 report, however, we were using the California coefficient unknowingly because that's what the software uses as a default, as opposed to the NWPP, which is our area, which I actually manually created with the assistance of Avista and this energy grid report done by the EPA. So what that did was when I took our kind of report and what I got out of the end of ICLEI in this first go around with this report, it had shown that our buildings and facilities had dropped by over half of their CO2 emissions since 2005, which didn't make a whole lot of sense. So when I went in, I found that California actually has a coefficient twice that amount of what Idaho does, and that kind of changing that levelize those out. And this is what you're seeing here on this graph. Under buildings and facilities, you see that there's about 711 tons of CO2 in 2005 and about 726 in 2012. I am attributing this to the population growth of employees at the city. There's more employees now than there was in 2005. Currently, there's 143.8 employees. In 2012 and 2005, there's 128. So more employees in the same offices equals more computers and more electricity used, which is having a higher impact on GHG. It's not bad. ICLEI doesn't incorporate growth factors into the software. It's purely just comparing one number to another. So the inference that can be taken from this data is for the marginal increase, it's a pretty reasonable impact, and that will be shown as these numbers are leveled out at the end of this report that come in of January. So the big one, streetlights and traffic lights. What happened here was basically that in the 2005 report, the lights were all were all entered into ICLEI individually, which, with talking to our Avista rep and looking through our energy bills, that's not really possible because we don't get billed per kilowatt hour for our streetlights. What happened with the streetlights is that they get grouped into 3 different billing areas, and we get billed at a flat rate because the city owns some of the lights, Avista owns some of the lights. So in order to equalize that out, they basically take that energy information and put it through an algorithm that's provided to me from Avista. So the best way to get around this is because there's no billing information available for 2005, we're going to update the baseline for streetlights to 2008, which is the oldest information available to us through billing records, and that will show us kind of an equalized level out of really what our streetlights are at, and will justify it could either justify the 642 kilowatt hours, but most likely it's going to justify the 33 that's seen in 2012 because that's the method that was used for the 2012 information. So water facilities, those are 2 biggest sectors of contributors. You have water delivery facilities and wastewater facilities. They've kind of both seen a increase or a decrease, but the increase seen in the water delivery facilities, I believe, is attributed to population growth. That's currently just a hypothesis. It's not proven in any way, but that's something that I'd like to focus on in the months to come. And then wastewater facilities show decrease, and I think that's also because there's a lot of differences in the management of the wastewater treatment plant that have gone on. There's less natural gas that's used there now, and electricity usage there is actually also down. But it is our biggest electricity user in the city as far as facility is concerned. So the final scope is solid waste. And in the original report, what had happened was when you look at all of the waste that's made in the county, which is represented by each one of these individual bars, 100% of that is made in the county, 65% of that is made in the city, and only 1% of that is actually created by the city of Moscow as an organization, so our facilities. The issue that arose in the original report was that the waste factor that was used was the 65%, not the 1%. So it made our CO2 emissions go through the roof for waste, which is why you're seeing in this graph the solid waste is actually pretty small. In prior graphs, it was twice as much almost as wastewater facilities after the report was done, so that made a big difference as well. The final thing in Scope 3 is employee commute. Surveys were distributed asking employees to talk about how they get to work and how far they drive and the type of car that they drive. And that information, as the surveys come back, will be quantified, and they can then be compared to 2005 results, which is why you don't see that on that graph, is because those surveys haven't been quantified yet because we're still waiting for some to come. So What's next? In the end of January, there's going to be an update from ICLEI to take our software online. This is going to really streamline our efforts and make things a lot easier for us to update. We're going to update all the streetlights and vehicles into the program, and by doing that, we should get a better idea of where the city is actually at in comparison to 2008 or 2005. But my largest suggestion, and something that I plan on doing at the end of January, is adding the year 2008 to the mix. So there will be 3 points of reference as opposed to just the 2. And what that'll do is kind of give us a better idea to make inferences off of, but it'll also give us a way to check and balance the 2005 data that's unavailable to check by hard copy. And if need be, we can use the 2008 as a new baseline for accuracy reasons, and then continue to make more reports as the years come. So the final thing is, as all of this information is completed and the report is finally polished, we can take areas of emphasis and main contributors and make inferences on how to make potential reduction programs in the future for those, and then really focus on attaining our goal by 2020. So I just have a few different acknowledgments. I'd like to acknowledge the mayor and the city council for your support. The Sustainability Commission has been helpful. Jen's been super helpful to me the entire way. I'd like to take a note to the past interns and all the departments that have helped me. And then Jason Hunnell and J.R. Killigrew are 2 representatives for us that have kind of been on the phone with me a lot in the last couple months. So, questions?
Thank you, Keegan. Very well done. We talked about benchmarks along the way, and so we've gone from 2005 to the 2012, and I applaud your initiative to plug in the 2008 numbers. What sort of thresholds for benchmarking are you proposing now, having been through these data? I mean, what interval shall we have these checks periodically, annually?
Realistically, the way that ICLEI will be set up in the future, because of this transition to online, and already now, kind of as I've started to learn and work with this program a lot more, as the information's already been entered, adding years at a time is not that difficult. Ideally, I would like to go in and enter all of the information from 2008 and 2012 and really get a look, because our information, especially for things like heating and electricity, really change as temperatures change year to year, and there's a lot of different demographics. So to get a really good idea and a solid equation, I would suggest benchmarking every year, which, as that information becomes available at the turn of the year, as the final bills for November and December come out, that's not too challenging of a goal, I think. So I would suggest that once annually, the intern would continue on to make that benchmark and update that information, and that'll give us an idea all the way up to 2020 for where we stand.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments for Keegan? Anybody?
Quick comment.
Yes, Tim.
Keegan made this presentation to the Sustainable Environment Commission last Thursday, and as a result of that presentation, the chair of Sustainable Environment, Andy Boyd, sent a letter to us, which is in our packet, and I'd just like to take a second and read the first paragraph of that letter from Commission Chair Andy Boyd. The Sustainable Environment Commission enthusiastically endorses the City of Moscow's Energy Efficiency and Greenhouse Gas Inventory Report, presented by the City Sustainable Intern, Keegan Caldwell, and applauds the fine work done by Keegan and the past interns in assembling and interpreting the data compiled in the report. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Okay. City Council members, we have a resolution here for your consideration, affirming the adoption of the greenhouse gas reduction goal of 20% below the 2005 levels by the year 2020. Tom?
Well, I wanted to first just applaud Keegan's work. I'm very happy with the careful nature that you've undertaken all of this, and looks like you've done some good ground proofing and checking and making sure that we're using accurate information. I appreciate that. I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we receive the the 2013 Greenhouse Gas and Energy Efficiency Report and pass the draft resolution. That's before us here.
Did you want to read it first? I'll second the motion, but did you want to read the resolution first?
Oh, no, not necessary.
Okay, all right.
No, I wasn't
No?
calling on, I was just going to
Yeah, no, that's
pass it
fine.
without the whole thing being read. I
Okay,
mean, I don't
that's
know.
fine, that's
Did you
fine.
want to?
I just didn't know if she wanted
Oh,
to.
no.
So I'll second the motion.
All right, Tom's motion and Sue's second. Any discussion? Wayne?
Just a question, and perhaps I'm missing something in this. Our goal is to have our overall greenhouse gas reductions 20% below 2005 levels. It doesn't look like we're going to make it.
Currently, the information would suggest that we're at about a 2% decrease from 2005, but
The
there's
vast majority of that was because of the changes we did to our streetlights.
the streetlights and the Eco Driver program
Exactly.
are, from my research for what we've done as a city, those are the two areas that have seen impacts, but those are also the two areas that have a majority of focus. So I think, though, that if we model programs such as the Eco Driver program for things like our facilities and take management levels to the offices that our employees work at and really get people to shut off the lights, turn off the computer monitors, and really all around use less electricity. Electricity plays a big role in our CO2 factor than other sectors such as wastewater treatment and water delivery are areas that might have higher technological cost for reduction in carbon footprint, but I suggest that we tackle the lower hanging fruit per se first and then take a look at those big projects, and a small decrease in those larger areas can make a large impact in our CO2 footprint. At this time, maybe tackling our waste stream, being that it's not necessarily the largest contributor, is not necessarily as impactful as tackling one of the other areas of emphasis, which is something we had talked about in the Sustainability Commission last week.
Okay.
Other questions? Sue?
I guess one of my questions, Keegan, is that you're looking at greenhouse gas emissions, and as one of the things that's changed in the last few years is that we all have computers here that are plugged in, but, for
Mine's not.
example, it's replacing 250 pages of printed matter per person.
Well, for
And-
some people. I have both. Tonight I do anyway. I know, I'm ashamed.
It's all your fault. Anyway, for those of us who have chosen not to use all that paper, now there's the electricity used in running the printer to print off all those things, but the non-use of paper, that doesn't get reflected in the greenhouse gas emissions, does it?
No, that's not necessarily true. What you're seeing, what that kind of comes down to is electricity used in building and facilities versus the waste stream. And paper products account for, I think it's 13% of the waste that we contribute. And that's an average based on, based on Oregon's waste categorization done out of the facility in which we actually send our waste to. But about 13% of that is paper products. And you do see decreases, but the CO2 emissions that come from that waste stream is the CO2 associated with decomposition.
So you can't win for losing.
Yeah, so it's kind of a, yes, it is in there within the numbers, but it's not something that's technically noticeable. But you're also saying that we're also adding in the iPads and our technology shift in those building and facilities, which is also accumulating all of the lights and all the other facilities that go on that use power. So it's hard to track those, penny for penny.
Other discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll start a roll call vote with you, Tim.
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
All right.
Okay, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Well done, Keegan. So that's going to be resolution number 2013-16. Okay. Jen, thank you for your support of all of this as well. So very good.